Okay, how's everybody doing? Shh. Thank you. All right, the lunch crowd. Who's had fun today? Just raise your hand real quick. All right. You guys coming back for tomorrow morning? All right, good, good. All right, I know you're eating, so I don't want you to keep lifting your hand up. Every Wednesday in our inner circle, we do economic updates with Lindy Pond, and they're amazing. So I asked her to do one today. Did you guys notice well, we talked about it, the inflation rate came out this morning? Did you guys see that? Shh. Okay. I know you're eating, so I'm not going to ask you to clap or raise your hand anymore. But I do want you to pay attention because these economic updates and indicators impact every single one of us. So Lindy Pond is with Finance of America and always is like the ultimate economic nerd. Is that okay?
I definitely like my charts, yeah.
Yeah, no, I do too. I love them all. So I'm going to turn this right over to you. Take it away.
Thank you. Which button is it for this? I had the clicker, but I can't see which, I don't have my glasses on.
Oh, this is the one that's
Yeah, which is
so
it?
This is forward.
Oh, but how do I make it full screen?
It is. Oh,
Okay. Okay, awesome.
You take the clicker.
How are you guys doing? Good? Yeah, awesome. Lunch good? Yeah? I got a ham. It's back there.
The ham was good.
Was it? All right. Okay, you guys ready? All right. I thought we would talk about, well, maybe we will. There we go. So let's talk about 2022. Ready? Let's first talk about economics. I'm going to start big level, and then I'm going to go down a little bit to real estate, okay? All right, so we all know what's going on in the world today, right, with Russia and Ukraine and how that impacts us is the gas and that it just exacerbates inflation, which we're going to get to. So if you just, there's a click, there's no light. So of course what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, again, is leading to the U.S. Treasury taking a hit. I mean, the 10-year taking a hit, the crude oil taking a hit, stocks taking a hit. So it is exacerbating, that's a big word, right? It's exacerbating the problems that we already had. When we talk about employment, that's the first place we always start. The rate is dropping very fast. So pre-COVID, we were at 3.5% unemployment, and currently right now we're down to 4%. The employment, the labor shortage, if you guys have noticed, like we go to restaurants and bars and we now have to be patient. I'm not the most patient person. You'll notice the labor shortage, right? If you ever tried to hire a contractor, we notice the labor shortage, right? You go to Lowe's and you stand there for 10 minutes and they say they're going to help you with the cleats, which is a nail, by the way. And then apparently there's no one that works in that department until Saturday. So we're all noticing the labor shortage, right? So wages are up 4 to 7%, depends on what source I looked at. The wage increases are typically permanent until a recession, which we're going to talk about. And then the real wages are flat, right? Because it's costing us more to buy groceries and gas and the cleats at Lowe's. So wages are going up, but also so are expenses. So it feels like we're kind of breaking even, right? Even if you got a little raise recently, it's all going out to other expenses that normally wouldn't be there, right? Everybody with me? Yes? Okay. All right, so inflation. This is the biggest worry of every economist right now. So as someone over there on that side of the room noted earlier, our CPI, core producer, the consumer price index in February rose from 7.5 to 7.9. When the core reading, when you strip out all the food and energy, was 6 to 6.4. So 7.9 is the top. Obviously, it's going to go higher as the months go on. So you can see the inflation is gauged by either the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or the Personal Consumption Expenditure, the CPE. So when you're listening to the news and you hear the newscaster say the CPI or the CPE, and you're like, what the hell is that? That's what this is. They're talking about inflation. So a healthy inflation is typically 2%. We're at 7.9, and it's only going to get higher for the immediate future. All right, so let's talk about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve right now has a huge impact on our lives, right? Not only do they have an impact on inflation, they have an impact on the current rates. So The first gentleman that spoke this morning, he's not in the room anymore. He mentioned a couple of historical things. So the only reason I bring this, and you guys can read, I don't need to read the whole slide, I'll go through it really quickly. The reason I mention this is I want you to see the trend, right? And I want you to see what's happened in the past. Have we learned from our lessons? Because that's what's going to tell us what's coming up, right? We all want a crystal ball. We all want to know what's the world going to be, what's going to impact our lives in the very near future, right? So in the 70s, inflation went from 7 to 14%. They thought that was transitory, which is what our now current Fed chairman thought, right? He was wrong, but he thought it was transitory. And the mortgage rates rose from 12 to 18%. In the 1980s, the hike of the Fed funds rate, the hike of the Fed, so the Fed hiked the rates like they're getting ready to now, and inflation dropped from 14 to 5, right? Big drop. Mortgage rates fell from 18 back to 12. But the problem was the impact, the loss that we had was we lost 30% in the S&P. The stock market. That's a huge hit, right? Then we also entered into a recession. So notice the trend there. Rates go, inflation goes up, rates go up. They kind of sort of mirror each other, right? Fed plays with the rate. They drop, the hike of the Fed fund rate drops the rate, mortgage rates come down, but then it leads into a recession. So in the late 1990s, inflation doubled from 1.5. Again, remember, 2 is normal. Right? It doubled from 1.5 to 3.5. Mortgage rates rose from 7 to 8.5. So Greenspan took immediate action. He didn't think it was transitory like they did in the 70s. He took immediate action. He raised the Fed fund rate to match inflation. That then inflation responded and dropped from 3.5 to 1. Mortgage rates dropped from 8.5 to 5.5. But if you guys remember, we lost a huge amount in the stock market, right? We lost 50%. We then entered into an recession. We then entered into a recession. All right, so currently now with Jerome Powell as our Fed chair, inflation increased from 1.75 to 7%, 7.9 as of this morning. I didn't update my slide. Again, they thought it was transitory. We now know it's not transitory, right? Transitory meaning very short term. It's only going to be here for a little bit and then it's going to go away. That was not the case. Mortgage rates rose from 2.5 to 3.375. We're closer to 4 1/8 right now. And then Fed was tapering and has now started their rate hikes. The Fed is targeting 4 to 5 hikes in 2022 and 2 to 3 hikes in 2023. What does that tell you? They're anticipating this year. They're also anticipating next year. So they anticipate it's going to take, they won't be able to do it sharply, drastically enough this year so that we don't lose too much of the market, that it's going to take a little longer than what they had hoped. So inflation and rates will continue to rise in the short term. If the Fed tames inflation, mortgage rates will drop. So right now, stocks are expensive, even though they're losing money. Stocks are expensive. They're overvalued right now. The economy is slowing, and the question is, are we going to enter into a recession? So here is the prediction of what's going to happen. You can see the gray lines. Again, I'm a total chart dork, right? So the gray lines represent recessions here and here. So right now we are at about, and you can see that the 2-year, 10-year, and a 30-year mortgage rate. So some people will say, well, the 10-year is down, so aren't rates going to go down? They're not directly, they mirror and they kind of jog along each other, but they are not, one is not a predictor of the other. So be careful of that. So mortgage rates typically like the Fed raising the rates because the Fed is now controlling the situation to get inflation in check. And mortgage rates closely align with the 10-year, but again, they don't match it and they're not predictive. So that means there'll be 4 rate hikes this year is the guess. I've heard 4 to 5. I've also heard it's going to go into 2023, like I said. All right, so this is very simply put. If inflation goes up, mortgage rates go up. If inflation comes down, mortgage rates comes down. So what happens when inflation goes up? That's right. And it comes down? That's right. Yep. All right. So caution. Many signs are reporting to a recession down the road. So to the point of the gentleman earlier, just before now, and I tell my clients this all the time, and I'm going to look at a couple specifically right now. You guys need to get your shop in order. My advice, right? Take this with a grain of salt. It's just Lindy talking here, right? You need to get your house in order, meaning if you plan on doing a cash out refi, Hey, Corey. If you plan on doing a cash out refi, if you haven't already done it because you were living under a rock, get to it, right? If you need cash out for something, get to it because rates are only going to go up. You cannot get yesterday's rate again. Not anytime soon. So if you have plans to do a refinance, to get some cash out, to get some liquidity, get that safety net, 6 is the rule of thumb on how many months of expenses you need to have in liquid savings. Not in your 401k, that's not liquid. That's you borrowing from yourself, right? Liquid savings, 6 months to pay your bills, of all your bills, right? To be safe, right? So what I want you guys to do, if you need to do a cash out refi, get it done. If you need to sell a property, obviously get it done, right? So kind of get things in order because a recession is most likely almost going to happen. So prepare yourself for that. Now, when we say recession, it's not a bad thing. I mean, there is a human factor of it, right? We don't like people losing their jobs. We don't like people having harder times. People can't pay their rent. That's why you're having your liquidity, right? Because when your tenants can't pay their rent because they lost their job and they can't get enough hours, they're not going to pay their rent. You need to have liquidity, right? So we need to have all the things that everyone has talked about the whole entire day today, right? But recession is really not bad for the housing market. Recession is usually good for the housing market. Bad things happen, and then that usually is a good thing for the housing market. Realtors like it. They get more listings. Things usually happen good in the housing market with recessions. All right, so we're going to talk about real estate, supply and demand. I love supply and demand. It's just so common sense, right? All right, so let's talk about inventory. So currently right now, and where's Rich? Because so proud of him that he was quoting my numbers. Inventory is down from last month. Last month we had 910,000 houses for sale in the United States. Not in Richmond, not in Virginia, in the United States, right? So currently now we have 860, so it's gone down. Inventory is 16% lower year over year. So look at the chart, Rich. Look at the chart. So back in 2007, we had 12 to 13 million. We now have 12 to 13 million more households now than back in 2007. So that's the demand side of it, right? So in 2007, there were 3.7 million homes on the market in the United States. How many do we have now? Correct. Of the recent sales, FTHB is a first-time home buyer. That's the dork in me, sorry. First-time home buyer accounted for 27% of sales. It was down from 30% previously. Cash buyers are up from 23 to 27%. Investors, woohoo, and purchased 22% of the homes, up from 17%. And then foreclosures and short sales are less than 1% of all transactions. Okay, building supplies. And I know this is a lot to read over here. I really just put up there in case there's a fast reader in the room, you guys can read through that. But we still have building supply issues. We need to make we in this room, need to make significant adjustments to balance out the significant cost increases seen in both January and February, so it's continuing, right? So pricing is increasing to accommodate higher labor and material costs. Here's our PPI, our Producer Price Index, under the subcategory of just construction materials. It is up 35% year over year. It is not going, it might go down, but we're never going to go to Lowe's and pay the same price for plywood that we did 2 years ago. Not going to happen, right? That's the world we live in. So if you take a look at windows, siding, insulation, decking, all of them are talking about the struggles that they're having, and it won't be until you can see the underline. It won't be until 2022, 2024, where they start to see relief of these things. So the world we live in today, me going to Lowe's, I'm looking for the cleats, and the guy not, I went to 4 of them. You're thinking, really, people? I'm looking for the... So it's going to continue for a while. All right, this is one of my favorite slides. Demographics. So we talked about supply, right? We talked about inventory, that's supply. Now we're going to talk about demand. Demand is the people, right? We all have to live somewhere, right? Except, Jason could probably live in his car, but the rest of us want a house to live in, right? So the demographics that we have now are favorable to drive the housing demand. So again, we have 12 to 13 million more households in the last 15 years. That comes from birth rates and immigration. We have 4.7 30-year-olds. Where's Connor? The 30-year-olds in the room, There you go. We have 4.7 million of them in the room, and they typically are the first-time home buyer. The first-time home buyer age currently for this generation, because they're slackers and they do everything later than everyone else, right, is 32 years old. I have to think if I have one, if mine's a millennial or not. The demand for housing in this age group is going to continue through year 2026. Did you guys see that? 2026. So the inventory problem is going to continue through when? Which is how many years from now? Yes. All right, so we take a look here and see how here we are today and see how the bars just get taller and taller. That means that every year the population of wanting that first-time homebuyer house is going to get bigger and bigger for at least the next 4 years. So when they talk about inventory, I definitely think we'll see some relief this year. I think we'll see a little bit more, but no way are we going to go from 860 to 3.7 million, 860,000 to 3.7 million, right? New construction is coming on board. New construction has all those building supply problems, though, right? New construction also typically only makes up 15% of the total inventory on that's currently listed. So if they can build as fast as they can possibly build, they can still only help us out but so much, right? The important thing for us on new construction, because sometimes I think, new construction, I don't care about new construction. At that end, because it's not new construction for investor, Sarah, it's new construction for the move-up home buyer, right? But the move-up home buyer, once they move up, then they typically sell their house that they're moving out of, right? And that's typically the first-time home buyer house, which tends to be the inventory that we all go after, right? So there will be some relief as new construction comes online, we call it. As new construction comes online, that move-up buyer is going to move into that house. They're then hopefully going to sell their house, which gives us a little relief. So yes, it will happen. It's going to happen very slowly, and it's going to be a trickle. It's not going to be an onslaught because of all the supply issues that we have. And it's also going to take some time. It's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. So all the people smarter than me say. All right, so price appreciation. So home price appreciation, say that one fast, is elevated, but it is expected to moderate. So you can see the peak that we had, home price appreciation, 18.5. I'll get into forecasts at the very end. It is moderated a little bit now, as we notice, feels a little bit moderated. Richmond is still a pretty hot market. So half the room here is from Richmond. It's a little hard to gauge. By some markets, Nashville is off the chart hot. So they wouldn't have any moderation in Nashville, but they would maybe in Ohio. So nationally, it's starting to moderate already. All right, so this is not 2008, and I won't mention Rich's name again. The mortgage delinquency rate is the lowest we've seen. So you guys can see here in 6 and 7, see where we were there? And these are, the green line is all loans, the orange line is conventional, FHA is blue, and VA is purple. So you can see how low our delinquency rate is now. FHA is always higher just because it is that type borrower. It's always higher, so there's nothing scary or new about that. The difference between 2008 and now is now we have more equity in our homes than we've ever had. So for us that lived through 2008, which was very stressful, new children, divorce, houses, all at the same time you had a crash and a recession, and you were in this business, very scary. The difference back then, there were people that were upside down in their houses, right? There were people who were just walking away from their houses, right? Over 50% of America's housing stock right now has over 50% equity in it. That's a tremendous amount of equity. So if you lost your job and you couldn't make your payment, what would you do? You'd put your house on the market, would it sell? In a heartbeat, right? People were trying to give away their houses back in 2008, right? So there's the night and day difference, right? Another night and day difference is the recession in 2008 was probably all of our fault in the mortgage industry, right? It completely was our fault, right? Did you have a pulse? Could you breathe? Could you sign on the dotted line? We'd give you a mortgage. Have a good day, right? So our lending criteria is much stricter now. You actually have to have a good credit score. You actually have to have been on your job for 2 years. You actually have to have more than just a pulse and those kinds of things. So, lending standards are much higher now. And then, of course, right now there's hardly any inventory. All right, so 2.1 homes right now, if you can't see that at the bottom, 2.1 homes have negative equity that's the lowest in 12 years. So again, there's a lot of differences between now and '08. Forbearance was a good solution, something the housing industry has never done before. I was actually a little surprised. I was happy, but a little surprised they did it. But it was an unprecedented problem, and it was a very good solution. We have such low, most people are working out of it right now. So will we see foreclosures? Will we see an onslaught of foreclosures on the market? No. Because people are working it out through the mortgage company, and if they lost their job and they no longer can afford their house, what are they going to do? They're going to put it on the market and sell it, right? So you're not going to see this onslaught of foreclosures like we did in '08. There's not enough, and if all of them today went on the market, it would make such a blip. All right, the rental market, because I know so many people here own rentals, right? So after a slight seasonal cool down, it typically cools down. You guys will know this better than I. In the fall, the winter months, right? Rent growth is moving back up. So it's up 0.6% in February, and year-over-year growth is 17.6%. So that's the rent on the growth on the left side. And then your vacancy rate, it's easing a little bit, but still expected to continue to gradually rise. All right, so let's talk about forecast, right? Because that's really all we care about. All that lead up, right? Okay, so this is where we are today. The labor market is very surprisingly tight, right? For the situation that we're in. I mean, I guess because of COVID and so many people stopped working or couldn't work, it is a little surprising that we've rebounded so quickly and so well, believe it or not. So the labor market is surprisingly tight. Inflation is the highest it's been in 40 years. Wages are increasing, but again, remember, it doesn't feel like they're really increasing because inflation is keeping pace, if not going to soon, I think, outpace those wage increases. Well, join us, gentlemen. Ray, have a seat. The Federal Reserve is raising the Fed rate. Mortgage rates right now are at 4%. We're probably, the little squiggly is an approximate. We're probably more like at 4 1/8. Now, don't get excited. That's on a primary residence. For investor loans, add 1%. Easily. Rule of thumb is primary residence is this, add 1%. For a 30-year fixed rate investor loan, add 1% for investor. And then the purchase market is durably strong, right? We don't have any inventory. We have all these people. We don't have any houses for the humans to live in. They need to live somewhere. They either rent or buy, but they still need a physical house to live in. So the economy is very strong and employment is very strong. All right, this is a 2022 forecast. Again, way smarter people than me. I collect this data from different places. So they think that the stock market is going to lose approximately 10% this year. So we know the S&P is down 11, and we know the NASDAQ is down 17. Some economists think we're going to rebound in the second half of the year. I don't think so now with the Russian situation going on. This was predicted prior to the Russia situation. I don't think we will. A 10% is a correction in the market. So people don't get scared or worried. The Fed is very aware of the decisions they're making, obviously, and the impact it has on the stock market. But if 10% is a normal correction mode, it's not until we get beyond that that people start to worry or react differently. Mortgage rates to rise along with inflation towards 4 to 4.5%. Appreciation will continue, but it's going to slow. So the great appreciation you saw before, we're still going to continue to see appreciation. And why are we going to see appreciation? Because of supply and demand, right? You don't have enough houses for the human beings to live in, right? You have way more humans than you have houses. So we're going to continue to see appreciation, but it's probably going to calm down a little bit. And instead of being in the double digits like it was last year, it's going to be in the single digits this year. So again, to Jim's point and the other speakers today, you guys be very careful what you're counting on for the rents that you're getting, right? So if you have an Airbnb, could you survive if it was an annual lease instead? Because if we get into a recession and people start to lose their jobs and houses appreciate, but it moderates, it slows down a little bit, can you still make your monthly payment based on that annual lease so that Airbnb rates are just icing on the cake, right? Everybody with me? So I lectured people about liquidity, cash is king, right? Get your house in order, right? And don't count on the rents up here. Just moderate it. Just make sure on a conservative level that you're going to be okay. Supply will increase, but only slightly because of the building shortages that we talked about. Rents will continue to rise approximately 5%, and then watch for signs of recession. Again, we typically fare well in the housing world in a recession, but just be careful. All right, that's all I have. Jim? Thank you. Yes, we need to do that, yes. So there's about 4 or 5, like on our weekly call, there's about 4 or 5 sources that I listen to on a regular basis. One of the gentlemen is Barry Habib.
How did they get,
I don't know, let's just give one away.
who'd like a book?
Who'd like a book? So I brought some books. Barry signed it. He is a huge economist specific to the mortgage industry. So there we go. Yes, that was easy.
Okay. Who's got an economics question? How was the